Hello and welcome to the Empress podcast. I am your host, Jessica, known in the online space as Jess the Empress. I started this podcast to help you be present with yourself, cope with chaos, and simplify your life. I do this by combining psychology, behavioral science, and the tarot. I have a background in mental health, specifically a master's in clinical social work from USC, and I'm a professional tarot reader. So get ready to have a nurturing, creative, and empowering experience with me as we use practical magic. Just a quick update. Before you get into the episode, I want to give you a trigger warning. There are some things that we talk about that are very heavy and very real because the topic of this episode is death. So if it is something that makes you uncomfortable, I just want you to get centered and grab things that bring you comfort as you settle in and listen to the episode, but I hope you enjoy it. Okay, we are recording. Hi, Zoe. Welcome. How are you doing today?
Hi, Jess. I'm doing really good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so freaking excited to have you. So I want to introduce you to the audience. So this is my lovely friend, Zoe. I've met her in grad school. So we've known each other since 2017, right?
2015 is when we started.
That's right.
Yeah.
We graduated in 2017. Oh my God, so long ago.
Mm-hmm.
And Zoe is a death doula. So that's what we're going to be getting into. I know you guys are going to hear the disclaimer before we start the podcast episode, but this is what Zoe does for her line of work. So will you let the audience know first, just for fun, what is your zodiac sign?
I am a Cancer sun, Leo moon, and Cancer rising.
I love it. I think that's where we have the same, the Cancer rising.
Cool.
We have like the nurturing and like people see us as like that nurturing energy. Yeah. Oh my God, I love it. Yeah. So we both went to school for social work and now you're working as a death doula. Can you tell us what prompted you to shift from social work into being a death doula?
Yeah. And I don't really feel like I shifted from a social worker to a death doula. I definitely have married the two, just like you have with, tarot, which I love, how we've both taken our experiences in grad school and, and meshed that into what we love now.
Yes.
But it was actually during grad school that I kind of, learned about the death positivity movement, started learning about the funeral industry as in general. And I think it was, I don't really remember what time in grad school, but I was already on our children, youth, and family track. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna finish this out and we'll see where that goes and we'll see where everything goes. But yeah, that's kind of where I was introduced to the topic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I remember that you had done something with hospice, right?
I work for hospice now.
Oh, that's what you're doing now.
Yeah, okay, I work as a social worker, a medical social worker for hospice.
Yes.
Which I think is really cool. It's kind of been the position I've been looking for a while. Where I am a social worker, and we have our background as social work. But when I interviewed for this job, I was like, wow, you guys are death doulas. So it's really I'm getting paid to be a death doula, which is awesome. Because I would totally do this work for free.
Yeah. And I do you need to get paid for it, girl. You need to get paid for it.
Yeah, for sure. But now, because I'm working full time for hospice, I feel I'm able to give on the side. So my doula services at this point are free. And so I'm just on donation basis, which I feel really happy to be able to do.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. I love when we can be in those positions to do what we love and receive donations. I think that's just a different level of service,
Yeah.
So can you share just some of your experiences generally about working in hospice? What does that really look like for you?
Yeah, so I primarily work outpatient, which means that I visit people's homes and I visit with them, or if they live in a facility. So a lot of my patients live in facilities as well. But primarily I'm visiting people in their homes or in a facility. I'm talking with their family members. I'm offering any support that I can around death and dying, processing the end of life.
Mhm.
Everybody has different needs at different times. And so, as social workers, we're used to like looking for resources and trying to help out in any way that we can. So, I'm just really in the thick of it right now. And I primarily get to cover the little town that I live in, which I think is really cool. It's not something that I've been used to before, working in a small town and living in the same small town. I'm used to like that commuting life, but I get to meet a lot of my neighbors and community members. And because we're in a small town in Oregon, I meet a lot of really cool people, a lot of interesting people. And so I love just hearing their stories and what got them, in Oregon or anything like that. So
yeah. How many do you call them clients? Like, what do you call the people that are on your caseload?
Working for hospice, I call them patients.
Okay.
If I was a doula on my like side business, I'd call them clients.
Yeah. Okay. And how many patients do you currently have?
I carry about 25 at a time. Can go up to like 30, but typically I'm about 25.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, you and I know that the needs of every individual is going to be different. So your present, like how present you are with each family or with each circumstance is going to vary, right?
Yeah.
So does every day look a little bit different depending on who you're in contact with?
Definitely. Okay. And so we also have a hospice house, which is 12 beds. And so we also have inpatient as well.
Okay.
That's typically short-term stays. But for the most part, my days can be different. Some of my patients I don't even meet because they don't really need anything and they've got everything like stable and, under control and they feel comfortable. And some people spend a lot of time with like hours a week. So it really definitely varies, but that's, the thing that I like the most.
Oh yeah, right. That it's never going to be the same every day. I know.
Exactly. It gets boring.
I know. Yeah. Where people were like, we need something different. Like I like the constant change.
Yeah.
So far, can you tell us what working in hospice has taught you and also inspired in you?
Oh yeah. I think like, I see how resilient people are. Death is like not an easy thing. It's hard for everybody. And I get to see people go through like some really big challenges and come out on the other side.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of listeners that are moms and dads, and death is something that we don't get to escape it. It's coming for everybody. And I know that some of my one-to-ones, my parents have had a hard time talking to their kiddos about death. So what advice will you share with the parents out there about this particular topic, whether they have family members in hospice or, a distant relative passed away and they're going to a funeral, all the circumstances, but generally, what would you advise?
I know that it can be hard and uncomfortable and you don't know where to start, but I suggest just doing it. I think like when it comes to kids, like all of the kids that I've talked to about death are very open and very curious. They have really good questions. And so it's kind of like it's the adults who are uncomfortable with it and don't know how to.
I swear. Yeah, absolutely. Because like we've been conditioned over time to be afraid of it, whereas kiddos don't necessarily have that conditioning yet. So you're still getting them at this. So you're getting them at this beautiful point of creating safety around death, which is an incredible experience and opportunity.
Exactly. Like we can raise them in a different way that we were raised, right? Like I don't know about you, but I never talked about death with my family. Like it was more of a religious thing for me in my experience, but it was never something that was just a conversation, nothing I really like thought I could ask questions about. But I'm really lucky to live on a property with my family. And so I live, with my 7-year-old cousin next door. And he was 3 years old when I moved here. So, he's grown up with me, like telling him about death. And of course we have our family farm here and our chickens die. And we have funerals for our chickens. And, we go through the steps and he's always just asked really good questions. Like kids are also like so much more connected to the spirit world. Like he sees ghosts all the time. And
I love him.
Exactly. My other little cousins who lived here for a little bit were, the same age, 7 and 10. They live down the street now. But yeah, I mean, my other cousin Rita saw her grandma here, you know, and so then it's just like, just being open to that and being like, that's really cool. Tell me how did that make you feel? You know, like they're so connected and so interested, and they're not scared. And so they're really fun to talk to.
Yeah.
But I do have a couple books to suggest for parents
Please
that I really
do.
like.
Yes.
So one is called I Miss You by Pat Thomas. And that one is just really good at like being really clear about like what death is, funerals, what's happening, very clear, kind of like black and white. And then one is called The Invisible String by Patrice Karst. And that one is a little bit more spiritual. It talks about like heaven, and it talks about like an invisible string that connects us so that even when someone dies, you know, they're still part of us and with us. But those are two really good kids books that I really like about the topic.
Those sound really lovely. I'm going to have to read them. I love children's books.
Yeah, I own them. So.
Oh, okay, cool. You guys, we're going to link those in the show notes. So don't feel like you have to figure out those names right now. You can just look in the show notes for those. So my next question for you, my love, is what are some myths and misconceptions that you can debunk for us about being a death doula, or maybe even death in general? Because I'm sure you see people coming in with all of these preconceived notions. What can you offer us today about that?
Yeah. About death in general, I've heard different things like dead bodies are unsafe or dangerous, like maybe disease wise. That's, you know, not true. Dead bodies are very safe. They're safe to touch, unless they had some kind of specific disease, but typically it's not a problem after death. So that's kind of one thing that I hear sometimes. And I think also another thing about death doulas is I think there might be like a myth or misconception that death is easier for us, or like we're not as impacted by death because we're so immersed in it. But couldn't be further from the truth. You know, I know a death doula I saw online post recently. Her name is Jill Shock. And she just made a post recently about, you know, grieving her dad. And I think he died in like 2015, and she's still grieving him. And so it's not something that we're immune to by any means.
Okay. So the misconception would be that y'all are like desensitized to it. I would think that it would, to your point, I would feel like it'd be the opposite, because you're so close to it. How could you not be impacted by it? And also, you have your own life and your own people, but then you have these other people that are opening up their door. And I'm sure that you're making these connections with them, and you're holding them in a space that's so vulnerable. How could you not bond? How could you not have some sort of like emotional connection, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's like, it's so honoring to be a part of the process in any way, shape, or form. And especially like, you know, I'm not always there at the death or after the death. I like to give space and, you know, only be there if people need me to be. But when they do want me to be there, I feel it's such an honor to be there, because it's such an intimate and private thing. It's just, you know, it's very touching, very touching. And so being, you know, in any way close to it is very, very honoring.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. So when you were describing your role, you mentioned that you do end of life planning. So what is that role when it comes to end of life planning? What does that cover?
So it can cover, you know, lots of just different things to think about when wrapping up your life. And there can be a lot of details depending on the person. And so, you know, you have things to think about, like, you know, it kind of depends on, well, lots of different things, you know, like what you want for yourself, you know, how you want to be treated at the end of your life, what's important to you, what is like pain and suffering mean to you, what let's see, so there's like the health side of things, there's the business side of things, so like bank accounts, life insurance policies, wills, advance directives. So there's things that you can do ahead of time to sort of like logistically figure things out, that I really advocate for. And so just thinking about them is the first step, thinking about, do I want to be on life support? Do I want to be tube fed? Like, what does that kind of stuff mean to me? How dependent on others do I want to be on others? Some people do not want to have to depend on others at all. They're like, once I lose my independence, I'm done.
I'm that person. Yeah. I'm like, just throw me to the wolves. I'm out of here. Like, I can't.
Yeah,
I don't let anybody do that. So like, what are the top 5 things that we might consider before death? We'll do 5 before and then 5 after, because I'm sure there are things we need to do after a loved one passes away, or even our own death, like what we need to consider to leave for like the people who are living.
Yeah. So, I think like one thing to think about is that there's kind of like 2 ways that we die, right? Which is planned and expected. If we're on hospice, obviously that's a planned death. If we have a disease that's going to take our life, that's an expected death. And then there's unexpected deaths, like accidents. Someone's killed in a car accident, or just shootings that happen. People die prematurely. So think about, kind of both scenarios. Like,
okay,
obviously we want to live a long life and die naturally of old age. That's like the ideal. But like, if an accident were to happen today, what's important to you? So, kind of like I mentioned before, one thing I think you should think about is like, and this kind of stuff is like addressed in an advanced directive too. Like, at an advanced directive, I think is really important. So like, do you want to be on life support? Is that something that you would want? If you do, for how long? Do you want to be tube fed? Like I said before. If you do, for how long? I think I was kind of getting into it already, but like, what does pain and suffering mean for you? Is it being dependent on others? Is it not being able to walk, or being bedbound, or, kind of like those kinds of things. So like, if you were to, God forbid, end up on life support, do you want to stay on life support? Do you want to be taken off life support? So those kinds of things. Like, when you can't speak for yourself, that's another thing. Who do you trust to be your voice when you can't speak for yourself, if you can't speak for yourself? So that's a really important thing to think about beforehand, right? Because afterwards it's too late.
Yeah, those are really good points. You guys, we have a lot to think about.
Yeah, there's a lot. Afterward, is kind of hard. I would say, if you have children or, pets, think about your dependents. So what's going to happen to your kids or your pets? Where are they going to go? That's an important thing to think about. For after death, what do you want to happen with your body? Do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be in a casket? Do you want a natural burial? There's green options too. There's a quote by somebody, I think it was Caitlin Doughty, who said, like, if you don't tell someone what you want, you're not going to get it. So if you don't tell someone you want to be cremated, like, you're probably not going to get cremated, kind of thing. You can also think about if there's anything that you want to happen at your funeral, like anything specific. I have like different views on funerals. I think that like funerals are for the grieving, but like people should have their say in their funeral too. So like, do you want your favorite food at your funeral? Do you want like your favorite music played? How do you want your life to be celebrated, basically? So like, if you don't have anything to say, like, you're not going to have any say in what happens. So think about that.
Yeah, that's really, really wise advice. You guys,
what kind of vibe do you want at your funeral?
Yeah. Oh my God, I love it. So yeah, that's so interesting. I actually think it's kind of exciting to think about that you can sort of like plan something when you're not here and be like, okay, you guys, you have to listen to what I said.
Exactly. Or I'm gonna haunt you. Like,
I know, I'm gonna haunt you. I'm showing up to your house every night.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. So can you share with us your current relationship with death, and how has it changed from basically before you started doing this work to now? Just sort of give us that overview.
Yeah, it's changed a lot over my life. I'd say I have like parts where days where I'm comfortable with it and days where I'm uncomfortable with it, but I'm also comfortable in the discomfort.
Right.
So I think it's a win-win all around.
Yeah.
So like my views and relationship with death have changed a lot of my life just because, when I was a kid, I was raised a Jehovah's Witness. And so I believed in like this very specific afterlife. I believed, other people would like die in Armageddon. And when I stopped being part of that religion, like my viewpoint went to like, there is no afterlife. I'm very much an atheist and very much like a black and white, yes, no kind of thing. And then, as I kind of like grew and matured a little bit, like my spirituality grew a lot. And now I'm very much like on the spiritual side. So like I got really into like near death experiences and hearing people's stories about that. And if you listen to those kinds of stories, they're all like very similar, and they all kind of like, they really kind of solidified my belief in the afterlife and like the spirit world and stuff like that. And so I feel much more comfortable with it, especially after learning about those experiences and hearing from like mediums who can connect with, spirits and stuff. Like it's incredible, the stuff that can happen. And it's like the stuff that's unexplainable,
Yeah. We love it, you guys.
Yeah.
Zoie is the witchy lady, so
and now I'm a witch. So
yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, she's into all the things that we're into on this podcast. So
exactly,
you're in good hands here with her. All right, so you've learned, you yourself have been able to navigate the discomfort of death. But what advice would you have for people who haven't quite got there? They think about death and they immediately are like, I don't want to think about it, and they just kind of shut it down. We would be talking about really expanding their window of tolerance here for what is coming, So what is it that you would advise people do to step into that space and start expanding?
I mean, it's really the same as tolerating any kind of discomfort, right? Like, which is a necessary skill in life. Like we have to be able to tolerate discomfort at all times. And, when I was in college, I was part of this program that, we went into like local high schools that didn't have health education, and we taught health workshops. And that was really hard to like teach health and talk about sex and stuff with ninth graders. Super awesome, but also hard because they're like the hardest audience ever, ninth graders. And
the eye daggers, you're like, oh God, please don't put me on TikTok.
When they laugh at you, it's just so disheartening.
It's so sad, I know.
That was like get comfortable with being uncomfortable boot camp. And like ever since that experience, I'm like, I can do anything. So, it's really like having that experience with discomfort and like working through it. Like we know from like being in a clinical social work program that it takes work, either like small steps and small victories or like flooding yourself with like an immersive experience, like whatever kind of like works best for you. Go with what feels best to you, but like it's gonna be uncomfortable, and that's a good thing. It
is a good thing. Yeah, and I feel like it's so important for people to hear you normalize the discomfort around death, even as a death doula, because then you're breaking that stigma of like, oh well, everyone in her line of work just must be totally fine with it, or doesn't have any type of feelings about it. When it's like, no, you're human. You have this inherent response to it. That's just like, I am uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, I think about like my mom dying, and if my mom entered hospice today or died today, I'd be done, like I'd have to take a leave. I couldn't do this work, right after a death that. Oh, and I don't like thinking about it, but I know it's going to happen, and I don't deny it. But it doesn't mean that I'm immune in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, sometimes I think about Toro and my heart is like, I get so sad thinking about it. And then I'm like, all right, well, he's here right now, so I'm going to love on him, but also I don't want to ruin my day by thinking about this for too long.
Exactly. Like you do have to like cherish the moments that you have and don't get stuck in that. Like he's not going to be here one day. Like, yeah, it's true, but he's here right now.
He is here right now, and he stinks. He needs a bath. He's right behind me. So tell us what you would want to change about this death denying culture that we live in. As you know, we've got all these like crazy freaking beauty products and everybody using filters and acting like, oh, they're going to live forever young is like a popular song, like all the things. So what would you want to change about the death denying culture? Maybe more so here in the United States than some in other cultures?
Yeah, I mean, just that we are so scared and like fearful of it, and like so it's like it's such a negative thing, like aging. Oh, it's so bad. It's um we yeah, it's hard and it's not like a fun thing to talk about a lot of the time, but it's the one thing that we know for sure 100% is going to happen to every single one of us.
Yeah.
Like we don't always all have like a lot in common, but like that's the one thing that every single one of us have in common.
Absolutely.
So why would we not talk about it? And I am just like not a fan of like people profiting off of me. So like I want to like spread the word. Like these funeral like homes are charging this much money to bury your mom for what? Like because it's the most dignified thing or like what? And so like because we don't talk about it, like people can profit off of us and they profit off of grieving families, like this is the most respectful thing to do is to go into debt for these things. Like no, so like we need to like take our power back. Like yeah, that's where like I named my business Reclaiming Death because like we've been dying at home on our own for hundreds of thousands of years, right? And so we have this knowledge in us. Like I think that people don't need me as a death doula. Like we can do this. It's nice to have a guide, and that's what I think doulas serve the purpose for, is to be a guide and to be a resource. But like no one's going to do it for you, and you don't need anyone to do it for you. Like we have this knowledge in us, and we don't need doctors or funeral directors to tell us what we need to do. We just need to like really follow our hearts and our guts and our intuition,
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, there's lots to think about in there as well. Like the people that are profiting off of us when we are vulnerable and when we need people like you who do come in and that can see through the bullshit and call it out and say, actually, there are some other ways. Here's some things you can consider, and then handing them those resources, because it's about informed decisions. You and I both believe in informed decision making, right?
Yeah,
it starts with an education and knowing your options. And I love that you're out here really supporting people. Anyone who gets to work with you is really lucky.
Oh, thank you.
One of the things that we had talked about before, and I heard you mention, was, and I think this was on a separate like catch up call, but it was that you had said getting old is a privilege. So I would really love for you to expand on that, because I think the audience would benefit from hearing it.
Yeah, I just say it all the time, and I truly believe that growing old is a privilege. And it kind of goes back to like what you're saying about like beauty products and filters and everything that takes away our wrinkles and stuff. But like you hear it in almost every song, right? Like if I knew then what I know now.
Yeah, right.
Like, and so like us, like when I'm in my 20s, I'm like, I think I know everything. But like everyone who's decades older than me is saying like, oh, when I was your age, if I just knew what I knew now, like, and we are like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, with time comes wisdom. Every like woman I know who like reaches her 40s and 50s like cares less and less and less about what people think. And I'm like, why can't we let's just start that now? Like, honestly, why do I have to wait until I'm 40 to feel that way?
Girl, yes.
Yeah.
I say that too when I look at people and they're like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have cared about blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to maybe stop caring about that today. Like maybe I'll start now and like see what happens.
I'm going to hear that and I'll be like, yeah, I can take that on now. Like, why wait?
Why wait?
And not everybody gets to grow old, right? And so a lot of people are taken way too early for a lot of different reasons. Kids get sick. We die at all ages. Death is, indiscriminatory. So, if we are able to make it to old age, I mean, just all of the health issues that we have nowadays. And like, it's like crazy how like much cancer is around everywhere. So to make it to old age and like to grow old, I think is just an incredible privilege.
It really is. Yeah. I love that. How has this impacted how you live, like your everyday life and your relationships?
Yeah, I think it's like really made me slow down. I mean, today I live in a tiny town in Oregon on a 5.5 acre farm with my family, and I want like nothing more. This is like where I'm so happy. I'd like to just foster my relationships. I like to be with the trees that are outside. The river is right there. just slow down and like be with nature, be with the earth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's death is a natural process. And so you see it everywhere. I mean, we're coming into spring, like winter is the death of all of the plants, and the
Yes.
spring is the rebirth of it. And
Yep.
so it's just like it's part of like being a witch and like being with that nature. And so it's all of it. It's all of it for me.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and slowing down. I hear that a lot too about people who do have the privilege of being old, and they say, God, you have so much time. Like, I wish I would have slowed down. So I get that. I like that. That's really good advice. So we're going to wrap up, but what other resources, because we went over the books, but what other resources can you share with the audience that wants to adventure out on their own to look up death doulas, death resources, and things like that? And you guys, everything that we talk about, it's going to be linked in the show notes, so don't feel like you have to write anything down. You can just click the links.
Yeah, so a couple of my favorite people. One is Caitlin Doughty. She goes by The Good Death on socials, or The Order of the Good Death is her website. She's kind of like the first person that sparked my interest in this whole thing. She owned and operated the first and only nonprofit funeral home in LA. And so that's how I learned about like nonprofit funeral homes and her work doing that. So I definitely recommend her anywhere and everywhere. I also recommend going with Grace. Her name, she goes by Alua Arthur. She's a death doula. She has a background as an attorney. And so her business is called Going with Grace. She's the death doula that I trained with. She's amazing. Yeah. She can connect you to lots of different doulas. She has actually a directory on her website of doulas in every state.
Incredible.
So that's a really great resource. And she puts out a lot of really great free content too.
Okay.
And then one other one that I like and wanted to give an honorable mention to was Talk Death Daily.
Oh, yes.
They do, great, just, daily topics and things to think about that are wonderful resources.
Okay, perfect. So you guys, like I said, everything is going to be in the show notes. And Zoie, where can people find you?
The best place would be my Instagram at Reclaiming Death, and that'll take you to my website. And you can also email me at reclaimingdeath@gmail.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you.
Jess, you're amazing. Thank you so much for inviting me and thinking of me to do this. And I love talking to you so much.
Yes, I love talking to you too. All right.